with this project, there are two main goals that I have for you. The first goal is we're going to expand like the set of stories we have and the set of people we have that we think of when we think about our science series. So that's goal number one. That's why we have the topic that we have. Goal number two is for you to hone your skills at giving a live presentation. So I'm going to take a moment, we're going to talk about what my expectations are for a good presentation. The first thing I want to talk about is what your voice sounds like. And with that, I've got three things I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about pacing, we're going to talk about pitch, and we're going to talk about volume. Raise your hand if you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you so good.
All right, so every single one of you can hear me clearly. That's really important. Every single person needs to be able to hear you. At the same time, it's really important to understand that if your voice is loud enough, people are going to begin to inherently feel stressed out. How many of y'all felt that cortisol spike? Right? It's unpleasant. It is physically unpleasant to feel like you are being yelled at. So keep that volume at a reasonable level. It needs to be loud enough that people in the back of the room can hear you clearly. At the same time, it can't be so quiet that people have to really strain to hear you. What did I just say, Atticus? You couldn't hear me. Exactly. So the people up front could hear me, right? Some of the folks in the back, if you were really straining, you were really putting a huge amount of focus and attention into being able to hear what I said, might have been able to understand me. You have to speak loud enough that people don't have to work really hard to hear you. Your audience has a limited amount of energy that they can bring to your presentation. If your voice is really quiet, you're making them spend that limited supply of energy on just being able to hear you instead of being able to engage with you. So that's volume. The next thing I want to talk about is pitch. And I want to be really clear here. This is a super cultural thing, and it's going to vary from culture to culture. But at least in the dominant culture here, which is what I'm like teaching you how to survive in, we have certain inherent associations with the pitch of people's voices when they are speaking. So when you pitch your voice up when you're speaking, people tend to interpret that as more friendly. It's more welcoming. It also is more questioning. It's more of a query, especially if you bring it up right at the end of a sentence. At the same time, if you pitch your voice down, you're going to be making yourself sound more definitive. You're going to be making yourself sound more certain. You are saying, hey, this is not up for debate. I'm not going to argue about this. Right? And this is relative to your own pitch, right? So it's okay if you've got a voice that is higher or a voice that is lower. That's not what matters. What matters is how you vary it. It is both good to have a voice that says, hey, I am welcoming you in here. And to have a voice that says, I have certainty. I know what I'm talking about. Both of those are valuable things. So what you have to do is you have to vary your intonation throughout your presentation. You're going to switch things up. The worst thing you can do, the worst presentations I've ever seen, are presentations where someone stands there and they say every single note, every single word with the exact same monotonous pitch. That is the worst things I've ever seen. It is so deeply boring. I hate it with a fiery passion. The biggest cause of this, the thing that tends to cause people to speak in a monotone, is usually if you're reading directly from the script and don't have good verbal fluency. So many people, some people have put in the work and time and taught themselves how to read aloud and be, interesting and funny and vary your intonation when you're reading aloud. But a lot of folks aren't at that level yet in terms of verbal fluency. So if you're not quite at that level yet, and you're just reading in a monotone, what happens is you are going to bore the heck out of your audience. You're going to make them tune you out. There's just not enough variation to sustain people's interest. So the worst presentations I've ever seen are ones where somebody has copied their script. Ismail, can we leave that be? Thank you. The worst presentations I've ever seen are ones where people have copied their script in size 10 font onto a slide, and it's just an itty-bitty scroll of tiny, tiny text that the audience can't read at all, and the presenter turns their back on the audience, and then they read in a monotone every single word on their slides, and every once in a while there is a weird pause because they have reached the end of a line and are finding the next place. Horrible. Please don't do that.
Or they run out of breath.
Or they run out of breath. So you have to vary up your intonation. That's a really, really important part of giving a good presentation. And knowing when to use that like up top, when to pitch your voice up higher, and when to bring it down. Both of those are really useful skills to have. The next thing I'm going to talk about is pacing. How fast you speak. Sometimes when you slow things down, you can give your audience a little more time to process. And if you make things a little faster, you can help re-grab their attention. What does not work is when you speak really, really slowly for a long presentation, like a full 5 minutes of this will cause your audience to feel a slowly growing sense of anxiety or frustration.
Yeah.
How many of y'all are feeling frustrated by that? Right? Absolutely.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when you talk slow, that's when you're making points.
Exactly.
But if you talk super slow all the time, people are just gonna be like, I just got the next word on.
Yeah. The key thing is varying things up, right? Change, novelty, these are things that can help people focus. Yes, Ismail.
So, it sounds like a movie trailer when they do like a slow voice.
Yeah. But movie trailers are short, right?
And also they're supposed to be tension and yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Speaking slowly can help build tension. But the thing about tension and storytelling, and fundamentally a presentation is a form of storytelling, is that you have to build tension and then you have to break tension. If all you're doing is building tension, that creates an unresolved feeling that is anxiety-inducing or frustrating.
It is scientific.
So that's what happens if you speak too slow. On the other side of things, if you speak really, really fast and you continue to speak fast for a long time, you're causing your audience to have to put a huge amount of their mental processing power into simply interpreting every single word that you say. So if I speak at this speed, many of you are going to quickly lose interest. If you have a momentary lapse of consciousness, many of us lose interest on occasion. We drift off for a second, and then suddenly you'll find that you've left the conversation and you have no idea what's going on because you missed. Maybe you only zoned out for a second, but you've missed everything. Now, it is possible that some people are capable of training their brains in order to be able to process information and speak to the speed at this rate. Especially folks who listen to audiobooks a ton and gradually crank up the speed, it's possible to train your brain to be able to actually understand things like this. My partner listens to audiobooks at 3.5 times speed, and they're able to actually process that information perfectly fine. But I can't do that, and most people can't do that. And you want to make sure that your presentation is actually accessible to everyone. How many of you found that exhausting?
No, I did not find that
What?
A handful of you were like, yeah, this is taking up my full attention, and I'm enjoying having my full attention being taken up, right? That's why speed can help. If you bring the pace up, that can help grab attention. You're basically requiring your audience to put more of their mental effort towards processing what you're saying. At the same time, you run the risk of exhausting your audience, right? It's like speaking really quietly. You're making somebody work really hard to hear you. And people can only put in that amount of effort for so long before you've tired out your audience and they can't take it anymore. So, like with pitch, we vary our pacing. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is eye contact. Now, I will be honest. Eye contact is not a thing that comes super naturally. There's a pretty decently sized subset of the population for whom this does not come, it's where it's not obvious exactly what people mean when they say you're supposed to provide eye contact when we speak. Now, I want to make something clear. Eye contact does not mean that you lock eyes with somebody and stare directly into their soul, because it only takes about 4 seconds for somebody to begin feeling uncomfortable with this situation. How do you feel right now, Paige? Very uncomfortable, okay? When people say make eye contact, that doesn't necessarily mean you're actually supposed to stare directly into their eyes. It means look at their face more broadly, okay? Additionally, how long you make that kind of eye contact in a presentation is, not actually a huge length of time. There is a correct amount of eye contact to be making when you're giving a presentation. If you stare at somebody for honestly, it only takes about 3 seconds for people to start feeling uncomfortable, right? It gets weird real fast. What you do instead is you move your eyes around the room. You make eye contact with a person, you form a personal connection for just a moment, and then you break it off before it gets awkward, and you move your eyes to someone else. So by the time you are done with your presentation, you're going to have made contact with every single person in the classroom. And your job as audience members is to be available for eye contact. Right? So I think at this point I've managed to make eye contact with every single person in this room. Oh, there we go. That was the last 2. So that's what you're going to be doing. It's 1 to 2 seconds per person. That's enough to help people feel like, yep, you're in here, I'm here, we're here together, this is an experience we're sharing, without making somebody feel uncomfortable. Now, the big barriers to eye contact that people tend to have in presentations is there's a very real tension between wanting to make eye contact with your audience and perhaps needing access to notes or a script for yourself. So let's take a moment and talk through the different levels of how you can use a script to prepare yourself. Level 0, where it's this is not really there, this is very beginner entry level, is you've written out a script of every single word you're going to say, and you stand there staring at the script, and you never make any eye contact. I don't want to see anyone in that position during this presentation. I think everyone should be capable of moving past that. The next level up from that is where you have a script, you have everything planned out, exactly what you're going to be saying, but as you have it written there, you see what the next line is, and then you glance up, you make eye contact. You go to the next line, you start reading that, you glance up, you make eye contact, right? Big things there that are really important is that if you're doing that, it's really easy to lose your place, especially if you've written your script as an enormous wall of text. So you have to make sure you've got things like paragraph breaks, or in decently sized font, right? Stuff that's easy to read. Break it up into small chunks so you're less likely to lose your place. And you want to make lots of, basically you're finding moments where you can look up and make eye contact. Yes, Stephanie?
Double space it.
Double spacing it is a really good way of helping to reduce that wall of text feel. But also indentations. I've seen folks color code things where maybe they just lightly color code every other sentence, so that it's a lot easier to find their place on the page. Other techniques can be having it broken up into different note cards, so that you're I'm on this note card, then I'm on that note card, so there's less text as a whole confronting you. So that's the basic level, right? That's where you might be. The next level up from that is where instead of trying to write out every single word you're planning on saying, instead you have the main ideas or big topics that you're planning on covering. So for example, I might have a note card in front of me that's voice, that's my first topic, and it's got 3 bullet points, which are volume, pace, and pitch. And I know what I'm going to say about each of those things, and I just have this note card with these key ideas to remind myself, oh, make sure you don't skip these parts. And I might even have highlights there, under volume it might be too loud, too soft, find your balance. Under pitch I might say something vary intonation. And under pacing I might talk about go slow, then go fast, and then talk about balance, etc. So you could have just key ideas, so you look at your key ideas and you're right, this is what I'm supposed to be talking about now. And then each of those key ideas is a little bit of talking you're supposed to be doing, but you haven't written down necessarily every single word you're planning on saying. So that's the next level. That's pretty good. If you get to that level, I'll feel really good about your progress here. The level beyond that is the level where you know your content so thoroughly that you don't need to be looking at a script. You can just speak freely and confidently on the topic. If you reach that level, you're at a point where there's no risk of like losing your place and having those like big, long, awkward silences while you're finding, oh, here's where I was in the paragraph, right? And it gets oftentimes to a place where you can speak with way more confidence. So what I want y'all to be doing is, as you're sort of thinking about these presentations, ask yourself, where on these different levels do I feel like I am right now? The next level up, that's your stretch zone. I want you to aim for that next level up. So if right now, the thing that you'd be comfortable with is I have written down every word I'm going to say and I would just stand there and read it, instead I want you to strive for, I'm going to glance up from my script and make occasional eye contact. If your comfort level is, I would be comfortable, with a script that I'm occasionally looking up from, maybe try to push for, I'm going to have the key ideas and the big points written down, and I'm going to speak more freely on each of those key ideas, but I still have given myself some structure, some framework, some notes, as opposed to a script. Does that make sense to folks? So basically I want you to strive for your next stretch zone. All right, that's eye contact. I'm going to give you all a little content warning for this next section on body language, because in order to describe my expectations for body language, I'm going to need to talk about how deeply and incredibly cringe and awkward 7th graders are.
Whoa.
Hey, that's not kind.
So I'm very sorry for what you're about to see. I would not have to do this if I didn't see all of these things done by students every single year. So we're going to start with the less awkward things, and then it's just going to get worse from there. Yes?
Oh, I was gonna hit something, but then I just slowed down.
I think you don't need that. All right. Amongst the most common and least horrifying things I see is the penguin dance. A little penguin shuffle. Person's just here, continuously kicking their feet. Sometimes there's a little, sometimes they're out here doing the two-step. Sometimes they're doing the can-can. Right? But folks are just here in the entire presentation, just doing a little dance. The thing about this is what causes this is anxiety. It is okay and normal to feel anxious, right? People feel anxious. But the more anxious you look, the more anxious your audience is going to feel. Because we as people have this thing called empathy. And if you look anxious, you're going to make your audience anxious for you. And then they're going to be spending their time thinking about how awkward this must be for you and how bad you must be feeling instead of actually paying attention to your presentation. So that's the first one. The next one, look, I know you're mammals. Mammals are creatures of touch, but you're not a lost little kitten that needs constant petting in order to stay soothed and avoid, peeing on the carpet. So why are you up here, long-haired people, just continuously petting yourself like you're an anxious kitten? Some of you have an uncomfortable smile because you're like, oh, I do that. Right? It is a very common thing. Everything I'm going to put up here is stuff I see all the time. Relax. Let your hands drop. You don't need to be in a continuous state of adjustment. Speaking of adjustments, clothing. You should come to a presentation. Some folks will say oh, you gotta wear professional dress, and then, what the heck is professional dress? There's all sorts of things around that and weird cultural stuff there. What you really need is to wear clothing that makes you feel comfortable and confident. So for some of you, you might be like, oh, if I wear, a tie and a jacket, that makes me feel confident. And for those people, it might be worthwhile to wear something like that. But if putting on a tie makes you be like, ooh, I feel like I'm strangling myself, and you're spending the whole time just adjusting and being like, I can't breathe, that's going to make the people who are watching you anxious. So don't do that. Likewise, wear whatever clothes you want. I will never judge you for the clothes you choose to wear. I will, however, notice when you are judging yourself. So if you are standing up in front of the crowd and you're like, oh no, I need to make sure that this is up a little higher so people can't see them. Oh no, but now my skirt's too short, so let me adjust this down. Oh no, but now the girls are, we fix this. Right, that is the worst thing to watch. Okay? And y'all, I know, those of you who are newly experiencing estrogen surging through your systems, who are deep in the throes of puberty,